Walk through the halls of the nearest hospital or mental institution, and you'll find people of all ages suffering from various illnesses and diseases. From cancer to a tragic car accident, from a destructive tornado to the abuse of an innocent child, evil, pain, and suffering of all sorts exist. Such suffering leads many people to ask the question, if there is a God, an all-powerful, all-good God, why does He allow the existence of evil, pain, and suffering? If God is all good and all loving, surely He wouldn't want evil and suffering to exist. And if God is all powerful, He would have the ability to do away with such heartache. Thus, supposedly, God is either not all powerful or not all good and loving, and thus the atheist argues that the God of the Bible is a logical contradiction and cannot exist. How do Christians reconcile the presence of suffering with the existence of an all-powerful and all-loving God? First, the problem of evil is actually a problem for the atheist, not the theist. As the renowned atheist William Provine stated in 1998, atheistic evolution implies no ultimate foundation for ethics exists. If such is the case, then how could an atheist logically conclude that suffering is actually wrong or evil? Former atheist turned theist C.S. Lewis noted this dilemma in his book Mere Christianity. He stated, "My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? Of course, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own, but if I did that, then my argument against God collapsed too, for the argument depended on saying that the world was really unjust, not simply that it did not happen to please my private fancies. Thus, in the very act of trying to prove that God did not exist, in other words, that the whole of reality was senseless, I found I was forced to assume that one part of reality, namely my idea of justice, was full of sense. Consequently, atheism turned out to be too simple. In other words, if real objective evil exists outside of my and your own private subjective feelings about the matter, there must be some objective standard outside of the natural world to give real meaning to the ideas of good and evil. Thus, the so-called problem of evil, pain, and suffering actually becomes a bigger issue for the atheist. But still, if God exists, why do people suffer? Why does an all-good, all-powerful God allow such? No one can explain in specific detail every instance of human suffering. However, contrary to what many believe, there are several logical reasons why people experience mental and physical pain. One of the foremost reasons is rooted in the fact that God is love, and His love allows freedom of choice. God did not create men and women as robots to serve Him slavishly without any kind of free moral agency on their part. God does not control His creation as a puppeteer controls a doll. God has, as an expression of His love, granted mankind free will, and that free will enables human beings to make their own choices. We frequently bring suffering upon ourselves because of the wrong decisions we make. The Apostle Peter wrote, "But let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or as a busybody in other people's matters." When we suffer the consequences of our own wrong choices, we have no one to blame but ourselves. We also suffer because of the personal wrong choices of others. If God allows one person freedom of choice, He must allow everyone that freedom to be consistent in His love for the world. God is no respecter of persons. A family may suffer because a father is thrown in jail for drunk driving. In that case, he is the cause of the family's suffering. God cannot logically be blamed for man's personal wrong choices, nor can He be blamed for the wrong decisions that others have made, whether people in the past or in the present. Much is often said about reaping from the wrong choices of others, but people tend to ignore that when one man does well, oftentimes profit is felt by many. People living in the 21st century have a multitude of advantages because of the work of others, especially those in former generations. Human beings are living longer because of numerous helpful medical discoveries. Advances in technology allow man to have conveniences that were previously only imagined. Thus, just as humanity suffers because of the sins of others, we also reap the benefits of their good labors. If we are truly free, it must be possible for us both to suffer the consequences and reap the benefits of our decisions as well as those of others. Another reason people suffer today is because there are those who ignore natural law and order. God created a world ruled by natural laws. These laws were implemented for our own good, but if these laws are challenged, then we will suffer the consequences. If someone steps off the roof of a 20-story building, gravity will pull him to his death. All of nature is regulated by these laws, which, by the way, demand a lawmaker. If God suspended natural laws every time His creatures were in a dangerous situation, chaos would corrupt the cosmos, arguing more for a world of atheism than for a world of theism. Finally, consider that the same Bible that says God is all good and all loving, and that God is all powerful, and that evil, pain, and suffering certainly do exist, that same Bible tells us that this physical realm, including any suffering we experience, is temporary, and that our purpose in this physical realm is to prepare ourselves for the eternal realm. God's purpose in creating the physical universe was not to create a realm where evil, pain, and suffering were impossible, but to create free moral agents who would use the time we have on earth to decide where we want to live eternally by the grace of God and through the suffering and sacrifice of Jesus Christ. In truth, although no one enjoys suffering, if experiencing pain and suffering at various times in our physical lives helps us spiritually to prepare ourselves for eternity, for Judgment Day, then such an ability to suffer can actually be very loving. Although the Apostle Paul suffered beatings, shipwrecks, imprisonments, a stoning, and many other difficulties in his life, he concluded what every human being who chooses to become a Christian can conclude. Our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory.